Long ago, in the highlands of South America, where the wind rolled down from the Andes like a whisper from the gods, there lived an old man in a quiet village made of clay walls and red tile roofs. His house stood at the edge of the village, near the hills where wildflowers grew and condors flew overhead. The old man owned nothing of great value, no gold, no land, no servants. But he had one thing the whole village admired: a strong, beautiful white horse. The villagers often said, "That horse is worth more than 100 silver coins." But the old man only smiled and said, "Maybe yes, maybe no. Who can say?" One morning, the villagers awoke to the sound of shouting. The old man's stable was empty. The white horse had run away into the hills. The neighbors came running. "This is terrible," they cried. "Such bad luck, old man. That horse was all you had." The old man stood calmly in front of his home, the morning sun lighting the lines on his face. He said, "Bad luck? Good luck? Who can say?" The villagers shook their heads and left, whispering to each other. They did not understand how he could be so calm. Days passed. The sun burned the fields by day, and the cold bit the earth by night. Then, one evening, just as the sky turned orange and the mountaintops glowed like fire, the white horse returned. And it did not come alone. Behind it followed 3 wild horses, strong and proud, their manes flying like banners in the wind. The villagers came again, wide-eyed with surprise. "What a miracle," they said. "Your horse came back and brought more with it. You were right, old man. This is good luck." The old man stood beside the horses, his hands folded behind his back. He said, "Good luck? Bad luck? Who can say?" The people frowned. "How can he still say that?" they murmured. The next day, the old man's only son, a quiet young man with strong arms and a gentle heart, tried to train one of the wild horses. It bucked and kicked. He was thrown hard to the ground and broke his leg. Now he could not walk. Again, the villagers came, their faces dark with worry. "What a tragedy," they said. "Now your only son is crippled. You were wrong. This was bad luck after all." The old man looked at his son, resting in bed with his leg wrapped in cloth. He touched his hand gently. Then he turned to the villagers and said, "Bad luck? Good luck? Who can say?" The people walked away, shaking their heads, confused and irritated. Weeks passed. The earth was dry. The crops were thin. One day, men in uniforms came to the village. Soldiers. The country had gone to war, and every young man was to be taken to fight. The cries of mothers and wives echoed through the village. Sons were led away, tears running down their faces, knowing they might never return. But the old man's son was left behind because of his broken leg. The villagers gathered once more at the old man's gate. They said, "You were right all along. Your son is safe. That injury was a blessing." The old man looked up at the mountain peaks, their tops hidden by soft clouds, and he said, "Blessing? Curse? Who can say?" Just then, the wind changed. A storm was coming from the north, fast and heavy. The horses stirred, the sky darkened, and far beyond the hills, something else began to move. Dark figures were seen in the distance, riders on horseback, not from the village and not from the army. Strangers, wrapped in long coats, their wide-brimmed hats pulled low. Word spread quickly. Bandits were crossing the valley. The village had no walls, no guards, only the sound of bells from the small chapel and the trembling of locked doors. The villagers gathered once more at the old man's house. "Don Mateo," they said, "you have strong horses now. We must ride and warn the next village. If the bandits come this way, we will have no chance. Lend us your horses. Help us." The old man nodded. He led the white horse and the others out into the open. His son, leaning on a wooden stick, stood beside him, eyes steady. "You may take the horses," the old man said, "but ride with care. These hills are older than any man, and they remember everything." So 4 brave men mounted the horses and rode fast into the dusk. The wind grew louder, like drums rolling across the sky. That night, the storm arrived. Thunder cracked above the mountains. Rain fell in heavy sheets, turning dust into rivers and rivers into floods. The villagers huddled inside their homes, listening to the storm and waiting. By morning, the wind had passed, but the road was gone. Mudslides had fallen across the path. Trees had collapsed. The only trail through the hills was buried. Then came the sound of hoofbeats. The riders returned, soaked, tired, but alive. They brought news. The bandits had turned back. The road had disappeared in the storm. The mountain had closed its path. The village was safe. People rejoiced. Children danced in the muddy streets. Firewood was lit. Pots of maize and coffee were shared. And once again, they came to the old man's door. "You saved us," they said. "If not for your horses, we would never have sent warning. If not for the storm, the bandits might have come. This was a blessing." The old man sat beneath his fig tree, sharpening a small knife on a stone. He looked up slowly, smiled just a little, and said, "Blessing? Curse? Who can say?" The people laughed nervously. They had grown used to his words, but still, they didn't quite understand. Later that week, as the sun returned and the ground dried, the white horse began to behave strangely. It paced in circles. It refused to eat. Then, one morning, it broke free from its rope and disappeared again into the hills. The old man's son wanted to chase it, but his leg was still healing. "Let it go," the old man said. "What is meant to return will return." And so, the white horse was gone. The villagers were quiet this time. No one spoke of good luck or bad luck. They simply watched from their windows as the old man sat by the door, staring at the horizon where sky touched mountain. 2 nights later, under a full moon, the white horse came back. But something was different. Strapped across its back was a small leather pouch, tied with an old ribbon worn by time and weather. Inside the pouch was a bundle of old silver coins, the kind not seen in the village for many years. No one knew where it had come from. No one could explain it. The villagers gathered once again, staring at the silver, at the horse, at the quiet old man who said nothing at all. He simply turned the pouch over in his hands and looked up toward the mountain. The wind had changed again, and far beyond the hills, something else was coming. It began with a low hum in the earth, like the stirring of a beast beneath the soil. The birds flew lower that day, and the llamas in the upper fields refused to eat. Even the river, which always ran with a cheerful murmur, grew quiet and slow. That evening, as the sun slipped behind the peaks, a group of travelers arrived in the village, dust-covered, weary, leading thin mules and carrying news. They came from a mining town far to the south, a place buried in gold dust and greed. But the mountain there had turned against the men. A fire, deep in the mines, had devoured everything. The town was gone. Smoke still rose from the valley floor. One of the travelers had eyes wide with fear. "It's not just fire," he said. "The mountain is moving, stones falling like rain, trees shaking. Something is waking in the deep." The villagers murmured. They turned their eyes to the hills around them, once beautiful, now looming and strange. That night, no music was played. No fires were lit. At dawn, Don Mateo stood on the ridge behind his home, staring toward the distant smoke. His white horse stood beside him, silent and still. His son limped up the path, leaning on a carved wooden cane. He said nothing, only looked where his father looked. Then, from the trees below, came the sound of footsteps, not of men, of animals, many, running. Dozens of wild horses burst from the forest, galloping through the valley, eyes wide, hooves pounding the earth. Deer, too. Birds shrieked from the trees, fleeing west. Something had disturbed the land. The villagers ran into the square. "What is it?" someone cried. "Why are they running?" No one answered. The old man came down from the ridge. Dust from the stampede still hung in the air like smoke. His face was calm, but his eyes were far away. "They sense what we do not," he said. "The mountain speaks before it breaks." The mayor called for a gathering. Under the great ceiba tree, with its roots thick like ancient arms, the villagers debated. Some wanted to stay, some wanted to leave, but no one knew what to believe. That night, as the stars shone clear and sharp, Don Mateo opened the pouch of silver coins again. He counted them slowly, 12 in all, each one worn smooth by time. He placed 6 into a clay jar. The other 6 he handed to his son. "Tomorrow," he said, "go to the river road. There is a man who sells mules. Trade these for 2. We may need to move with the mountain." His son hesitated. "But we don't know if it's coming here." Don Mateo looked at the sky. A red glow touched the far edge of the clouds. He said only, "When the earth whispers, listen. When the wind carries the story of fire, walk before it becomes ash." And the next morning, before the sun rose, his son was already gone, following the narrow road that curved between the cliffs and the water. The white horse waited at the fence, ears forward, watching the hills. The ground was still again, but far beyond the trees, hidden in mist and stone, something had begun to tremble. It was not the trembling of fear, nor the shiver of cold. It was the breath of the mountain, slow and deep, like an old beast stirring from centuries of sleep. And though no man could see it yet, the trees had begun to lean ever so slightly east, as if pulled by a force older than wind. By mid-morning, the sun had risen pale behind a veil of thin clouds. The village felt strange, too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. Even the children, who usually chased chickens and shouted in the streets, stayed close to their mothers. Don Mateo moved through the village slowly, speaking to no one. He stopped at each house, leaving behind a bundle of dried maize, a bit of salt, or a pouch of coca leaves. The gifts were small but meaningful. He said nothing as he gave them. People watched him from their windows, puzzled. "Why does he give things away?" whispered an old woman. A man answered, "Perhaps he knows something we don't." Meanwhile, his son had reached the lower valley where the river split the land. He found the mule trader as his father had said, an old Quechua man with eyes like dark glass and hands that never stopped moving. The trader looked at the coins, weighed them silently in his palm, then nodded. "2 mules," he said, "one strong, one quiet, both sure-footed. You'll need feet that listen to the earth." The son frowned. "What do you mean?" The man only pointed toward the north, where the peaks sat like sleeping giants. "They are waking, one by one." With little time to waste, the son began the journey back, leading the mules by rope, watching the sky with growing unease. Overhead, the clouds had changed shape, long fingers stretching across the heavens, reaching toward the south. Back in the village, Don Mateo was preparing. He checked the saddles, tied up the bags, and filled clay jars with clean water. He placed 3 bundles by the door, one for food, one for tools, and one for silence. That last bundle was nothing but a cloth, folded neatly. The villagers came again. "Old man," they said, "what are you doing?" He replied, "Preparing." "For what?" they asked. He looked at them, eyes steady like stone. "For what the mountain has remembered." They fell quiet. Still, no one else packed, no one else moved. People don't leave their homes for a sound they cannot name. That night, the wind returned, but this time it did not sing, it howled. The dogs barked endlessly. Doors creaked on their hinges. The earth made no sound, but the walls seemed to breathe. At the edge of the village, the white horse paced. Its ears flicked toward the hills. It snorted, then stomped once, twice, and stared into the darkness beyond. In the distance, a dull rumble rose, soft, rolling, not quite thunder, not quite anything. Then it faded. Just before dawn, the sun returned. The old man met him in silence, took the mules, patted their necks, and led them to the back of the house. "Tomorrow," he said, "we leave at first light." His son glanced back toward the village. "No one else is going." The old man's hands moved slowly as he tied a blanket. "They will wait, some out of fear, some out of faith, some because they do not yet know that stillness can be dangerous." "But we could warn them again." Don Mateo raised a hand gently. To warn someone who is not ready to hear is like throwing seeds into stone. And as the stars faded and the first hint of blue touched the sky, the white horse lifted its head sharply. Its ears twitched, its body stiffened. From deep within the mountains, beneath root and stone, the earth gave a sound, a low, hollow cry, like the voice of something old and buried too long. The mountain was no longer sleeping. At first, it came as a breath, a sudden gust of hot wind, carrying the scent of ash and iron. The sky above the eastern peaks darkened, though no clouds moved. The light turned golden, then red, as if the sun itself had stepped closer to the earth. Don Mateo stood at the edge of the village once more. The white horse was still beside him, alert, its muscles tense, eyes fixed on the mountains, as though watching an old enemy rise from the grave. The sun came up quietly, leading the mules. "Is it time?" he asked. Don Mateo did not answer right away. He bent, touched the ground, and pressed his palm to the soil. It was warm. "Soon," he said. "Not now, but very soon." That evening, strange things began to happen. The birds flew in crooked patterns, flocks turning in sudden circles before disappearing into the trees. The goats in the lower field refused to eat. The village well, always full, was now quiet, the water low, reflecting only a sliver of sky. In the square, people whispered. Some said it was a sign from the heavens. Some said it was punishment. Some still said it was nothing at all. But Don Mateo, without raising his voice, said one thing to all who passed. The earth always warns. The wise prepare before it screams. Still, many chose to stay. It is hard to leave behind what you've built with your hands, walls that remember your children's first steps, doors that once opened for love, windows that held back the rain of many years. That night, a young mother came to Don Mateo's home. Her child was sick, fevered, breathing fast. "I have no mule," she said, trembling, "and I have nowhere to go." Don Mateo did not speak. He simply rose, took one of the packs from his own mule, and set it aside. Then he pointed. "She rides mine. You ride with your son." The woman began to protest, but he shook his head slowly. "Nothing we give is ever lost, Senora, only delayed in its return." She wept, not from sadness, but from something older, something like understanding. Later, as the fire burned low in the corner of the old man's home, his son asked softly, "Why do you help them when they never listened?" Don Mateo looked into the flame. "Because we do not help others to be remembered. We help them so we remember who we are." Outside, the wind grew heavy again. It no longer felt like air. It felt like pressure, as if the sky itself was leaning on the hills. Then it came, a deep groan rolling through the earth like thunder underfoot. The walls trembled, the clay pots rattled. The white horse neighed loud and clear, its call echoing through the dark. The villagers ran into the square, crying out, calling names, searching for family. Dust rose from the roofs. Stones tumbled from the edge of the cliffs. And, beyond it all, the sound of cracking rock, like bone splitting, sharp and final. Don Mateo stepped outside, gripping the reins of the white horse. "It has begun," he said. His son stood behind him, holding the mules. The woman clutched her child close, ready. The old man turned once, looked at the village, then to the far hills, where a dull red light began to stain the horizon. And as the earth moaned once more beneath their feet, they began to move, quietly, without panic, without fear, along the path the old man had marked long ago, toward the upper trail where the wind was clearer and the stone less soft. Behind them, the mountain breathed again, louder this time, but Don Mateo did not look back. He walked with quiet purpose, the reins of the white horse loose in his hand, the wind pressing gently against his weathered face. The old path curved along the edge of the ridge, narrow and stony, rising slowly above the valley. Behind him came his son, the mother, her child, and the two mules carrying bundles of grain, water, and silence. The higher they climbed, the quieter the world became, except for the mountain. Every few moments, the earth gave a low, heavy thud beneath their feet, like the beating of a great heart, slow but rising. Pebbles bounced from the cliffs. Trees swayed though there was no wind. From the ridge, they could see the village below. Lanterns flickered in the windows. People still moved between houses. Some were packing, others argued. A few simply stood still, looking up at the growing red line glowing above the mountains. The child in the mother's arms stirred. His fever had eased. He opened his eyes. "The sky is burning," he whispered. "No," the old man said without turning. "The sky is warning." They continued on. As they passed an old shrine carved into the cliffside, its stone saints worn faceless by rain and time, Don Mateo paused. He removed his hat, placed it gently on the rock ledge, and whispered something no one could hear. Then he kept walking. By the time the sun began to rise behind the smoke, they had reached the high pass, a small plateau nestled between two sharp ridges. From there, they could see the land stretching out to the west. Forest, rivers, the faint silver glint of distant salt flats. And behind them, the mountain rumbled again. This time, the sound did not stop. A long, rolling groan poured from the depths of the earth, followed by a crack, loud and deep, like a tree being split in half by unseen hands. Then came the dust. It rose from the valley floor like a beast uncoiling, gray and wide and terrible. A sudden roar chased it, followed by the blinding flash of fire bursting from the side of the mountain. The old man stood still as the others crouched. The earth shook violently. Stones tumbled from the cliffs above. Birds flew screaming across the sky. But on the high ridge, the wind remained calm. The ground held. The white horse neighed once, then stilled. Don Mateo turned to look, not in panic, but in understanding. His eyes followed the plume of smoke rising where the old village once stood. His voice was soft when he spoke. "It has taken what it must." His son stared in disbelief. "The whole village?" The old man nodded once. "Some things must fall, so others may rise again." They waited in silence as the dust spread, swallowing the valley. Far below, faint figures moved. Survivors, stumbling from the lower trail, coughing and crying, carrying what they could. Not many, but some. Don Mateo's son looked to his father. "They followed?" "Only when the mountain screamed," the old man said. "Some people hear only after the fire." The sun climbed higher, casting gold across the ash. One of the mules brayed. The mother held her child close, tears in her eyes, not of grief, but of relief. Don Mateo walked to the edge of the ridge and looked ahead, beyond the forests, beyond the rivers, toward a land untouched by the shaking earth. And as the morning light poured through the broken sky, he took the first step forward, not with haste, not with fear, but with the calm of a man who has always walked beside time. Behind him, the white horse followed. Step by step, they descended from the ridge, leaving behind the smoke-filled sky. The sun, though dimmed by ash, still cut through the morning with steady warmth. The group moved in silence, each carrying their own thoughts, their own fears, their own hope. Below, the survivors gathered slowly, faces stained with soot, eyes wide, not just from fear, but from awakening. They had seen what they could not imagine. And now they looked up toward the ridge where the old man stood, calm, clear, unmoved by panic. Some began to climb. They followed the same path, winding up past the shrine with the hat, past the stones where saints had no names, past the ledge where the white horse once waited. They followed not because they were told, but because they now understood. The land had changed. Their lives had changed. And they would never again see silence as safety. By the time the sun reached its peak, the group stood together in the tall grass, where the world was quiet again. Don Mateo turned to face them all. His voice was low, but it carried. "You have seen what I've seen. You have heard what I've heard. But now you must do more than survive. You must remember." He pointed to the west. "There you will find new land. It is not rich, it is not soft, but it will listen to your hands. You will build again, not just homes, but wisdom." They looked at one another, uncertain. Don Mateo continued, "The mountain did not rise to punish us. It rose to remind us. Life speaks before it shouts. It trembles before it breaks. And if we do not listen to the small things, we will be broken by the big ones." The mother, holding her child, asked, "But how will we know next time?" The old man looked at the child, then at the horse beside him. "Pay attention to the quiet. The animals knew. The wind warned. Even the trees bent to show the way. Life is always speaking, but most only hear the loudest voices." A hush fell. Then, slowly, one by one, they began to move. Some led animals, some carried tools, some held nothing but each other. All walked west, toward land not yet claimed, toward work not yet done. Don Mateo waited until the last had passed. Then he stepped forward once more, the white horse at his side, and whispered to no one in particular, "May we never again wait for the earth to raise its voice before we learn how to listen." And with that, he walked on, not as an old man running from ruin, but as a guide moving toward rebirth. Beneath his feet, the ground held firm. Above his head, the smoke began to clear, and somewhere in the distance, the wind sang once more.